And start with a word of prayer, please. And I ask Pastor Samuel Augustine to lead us in prayer. Thank you very much.
A pleasant evening to all. Of course, we give honor to the head table and especially our distinguished guest, the Honorable Dr. Ralph Gonzalez. Shall we bow our head as we pray, please? Our Father and God, tonight we give you thanks and we give you praise. We consider this, O God, a great occasion because, God, it is you who told us in the word that we must give honor to whom honor is due. And truly, O God, we have gathered here tonight to honor the legacy of an individual who have served with an unwavering commitment to uplift those, O God, that he served. And tonight, God, we bless the memory of his legacy. And we ask you, God, to not just bless the memory of his legacy, but bless those that he nurtured and those he poured his life into. For truly, oh God, they have a great mantle to carry. Tonight, God, even as we gather, we do thank you. We do thank you, oh God, for this gentleman. We thank you, O God, for the work that he has done. We thank you for his service, O God. And because the word teaches us that those who serve are the greatest of all, we remember him. We remember him, O God, as a great Dominican because he served and he served selflessly. Tonight, O God, bless this occasion, we pray. And let it be a memorable gathering as we honor the legacy and the memory of this great man. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you very much. Good evening. We have Prime Minister Fidel Grant, Acting Prime Minister, here with us. We have Prime Minister Dr. the Honorable Ralph Gonzalez, Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, a true friend of Rosie, a friend of Mike, a friend of the Dominican Labour Party. We have Honorable Cassani Laville, the General Secretary of the Dominican Labour Party. And we have with us tonight on the head table, Tiani Behanzin, the son of Rosie, representing the family here tonight. We have many distinguished friends, ladies and gentlemen, members of parliament, members of cabinet, members of the diplomatic corps, friends of Labour, friends of Rosie, friends of the progressive movement, and so many people that I would like to call. But tonight we're here remembering a great friend, remembering a great hero, remembering a great comrade, a brother, a father, an uncle, a cousin. And you know, when you talk of Rosie and Rosie Douglas, you really died, had a big heart, and who eventually died of an enlarged heart. Somebody who loved, somebody who gave, somebody who was selfless, somebody who inspired, somebody who educated, somebody who thought, somebody who was just somebody of everything. And Rosie wasn't about Rosie, he was about everybody. We have Prime Minister Roosevelt Skerritt following on online. Comrade, good night to you. And Vince called to say that he's out of state, but he's following as well. A good night to you, comrades. And there's so many people who are listening, and the program has been carried live tonight on Kyrie, on DBS, on the Prime Minister page. It's all on Facebook and YouTube and Kyrie TV. And we're glad to have so many people tuning in here tonight, because tonight we are remembering a friend, a hero. And you said 25 years after, we are still here. Rosie brought us to the promised land, and he did not have the time to enjoy it with us. But I'm sure wherever he is tonight, he's looking down and he's smiling. He's saying, for 25 years, you all kept it going, and you all are doing well. And tonight, we don't want to single out people because we say everybody own Rosie. But Reggie Austri was there with him in the vineyard, fighting right through. Comrade Nathan in front there was right there, up and down with Rosie, in and out. You know, there were so many people who was there with Rosie. When you talk of his friends who went to school with him in Canada, and they tell you of the heroic and heroism of Rosie Douglas, it's amazing. Not too long ago, I was in Guyana, met a guy from Ireland, and he was talking about Rosie Douglas and the hero who Rosie Douglas was for the people of Northern Ireland. And Matt Peltier is on the side there. Matt was with him when he was welcomed in Northern Ireland at the conference of Sinn Féin in 2000, Matt. And you would recall that Sinn Féin was very proud and very grateful that Rosie helped them bring peace to Northern Ireland. And Rosie used to say to me, I am working to bring peace to Northern Ireland. The British government is spending £4 billion on security in Northern Ireland. And I'm going to bring peace to Northern Ireland. And what I want is for the British government to use a small part of that peace dividends and give to Dominica, because we lost the bananas, and I want them to invest a small part of that £4 billion to Dominica's peace dividends. And when he went into Northern Ireland in 2000 with Matt and Carly and Ivona and the others who accompanied him then, they achieved the peace in North Ireland. And 2 weeks ago, I met a guy in Guyana, and he was reminding me how he knew Rosie and the work Rosie had done with them in Northern Ireland, and how pleased he was. But tonight, it's not about me to talk about Rosie. Tonight is for somebody else who spent so much more time with Rosie. I spent a lot of time with him, Matthew. But you had the last of the Mohican. We always had the Mohicans. You had Team Hector. You had Odlum, George Odlum in St. Lucia. You had Ralph Gonzalez. And you had Rosie Douglas. And the last of the Mohican is here. And tonight he will be telling us about his friend and his comrade. They went back for such a long time. Such a long time. And before Ralph worked with Rosie, I'm taking the liberty to say Ralph as a comrade tonight. But the Prime Minister of St. Vincent, back in the days, worked with Rosie. And he worked with Mike as well. I recall the days of SCOPE, the standing committees of opposition parties, when all the Labour parties were in opposition. And we formed SCOPE as a united front, trying to see how we could work together as united brothers of similar ideologies and principles and passion to bring together the vision of the social democratic movement in the Caribbean. And the comrade Ralph was there. And Mike was there, representing Labour. Rosie wasn't part of Labour, but he was supporting. And Tim and the guys were there, and George Odlum and them were there. You know? And Rosie, wherever he would have been, wherever he is now, would look back tonight, and Mike, and they would say, 25 years. And we were not there, or we are not there, but the guys that have maintained it. They will be proud of Roosevelt Skerritt and his Labour Party team here in Dominica. Just as they would be proud of Comrade Ralph, the Mohican who fought with them through thick and thin, all around the Caribbean and across in Africa as well. These guys fought and they fought hard. And it wasn't about the individual, it was about a movement. And Rosie, when he was Prime Minister, I recall, he wouldn't take the security to drive him down to Portsmouth after work. He would come, jump in my vehicle, and I had to drive him. And sometimes he would be sleeping, and I driving after hold Rosie on one side, and he would say, I want you guys, you guys have to learn and learn fast, because I'm in this thing for one term. After one term, you will have to continue. And he said, I'll support you all, but I'll support you all out from Africa. Because I have a continent to move. I cannot stay here on one rock. I have a whole continent to move. So you guys, I'm with you all for one term. Learn and learn fast, because you have to continue, you all have to continue. But I'll be out moving the continent of Africa. And there's so much about Rosie to be spoken about. So much about Rosie that all of us here could talk about. And Otis, and Knight, and Patel, and all the other guys, and so many people so well. And when he came down, he went straight to Grand Bay because of the revolutionary spirit of Pierrot and the guys out in Grand Bay. You can't talk about Rosie and don't talk about Robertine in Paybush. He would come and just go out home and sleep between she and her husband. And don't reach at his home. And there are so many people who owned Rosie and who had the right to. And the family of Rosie, of course, was there all the time. And he was fighting for everybody else. And he said he had a large family. And the family will help him take care of the rest of the family. So Tiani was here. And Debbie felt away sometimes. But he always said, you know what? I have a large family. They'll take care of them. That was the person who Rosie Douglas was. But it's not about me. It's not about me to talk. I'm just here to say welcome. Welcome. You put on a mic to me and you mentioned the name Rosie and I cannot stop. So I want to say welcome to one and welcome to all. And special welcome to Prime Minister Gonzalez, a friend and brother of Rosie Douglas. And at this point in time, I welcome to the podium the son of Rosie, Tiani Douglas, represent the family, to give a few words and brief remarks on Rosie Douglas.
Just want to say good evening to everybody. This last few days have been very emotional for us because I remember we had just returned from the, I think within 5 weeks, returned from Rosie's first state visit to Taiwan. My brother Kim was studying there, and we all met, and for some reason, Rosie wanted all of us to be there for that state visit. There was something that was pressing me a lot because I had a lot of premonitions, and I tried to warn him of what I saw, what I expected, and typical Rosie, he dismissed all of it. I then summoned my brothers one evening with Nathan, and I told him that I believe that his days are going to be short. I told him within 3 months, it may be that they take action on you and you will no longer be with us. Rosie dismissed me. I then set him up the following night. We spoke for about an hour and 40 minutes. I tried to, show him what I saw, what I expected. And he said to me, don't be ridiculous. Nobody will kill me. The place will become ungovernable. I tell him, but it depends how they take you out and how the people receive it. So that is probably more important than your dismissal. And I knew he had listened to me because when we went on the way back, when we were in the US, he agreed to my suggestion of returning to Dominica from studies in England to be his personal secretary outside of the politics, because Rosie never believed that any of his family should sit in government or in politics while he was in the lead of the country. He so fearful he was of nepotism. But I don't really want to talk here this evening. I just really wanted to give an opportunity for us to reflect on the 25 years since his passing, and that there are many lessons that we can still, we have not really listened to, that we can probably give a certain direction and fresh. The first thing I would like to do, though, I had intended to bring the Naya Bringy brothers to grace the evening with their drums and their chants. And the first thing is to recognize the importance of the press, people like Ivona, John Bastos Luge, people like Felix Augustine, and Matt. I think Matt was the... Matt, could you come over here, Matt? I think Matt is, apart from... I wouldn't say that word. Matt is probably the journalist that first traveled with him. And when I say travel with him, in style, because I went into Rosie's room when I arrived from, I think I was in London, flew into New York to join the delegation to go into Taiwan. Matt and Carly was on the bed. Rosie was on the couch. A few fellas he was holding a campaign meeting in New York. And so these two were actually, he and Carly were actually in the bedroom, all their suitcase open and so on. Rosie was in the gallery part of the room. So much the importance of the press. And Rosie's a person, you pick him up. I used to pick him up at Gatwick. He will tell me, He will call me 2 in the morning, pretend to be an old lady in Portsmouth. And then when he catch me, I catch you. But then he was always had this humor about him. That's why it was quite strange that the Canadians said he was a risk to national security. I said, that joker you all up there? That's, why would you be afraid of somebody like that? So I just wanted to acknowledge the importance of the press. He was always open to the press because when people wouldn't listen to him, he would call the radio station. He would make me take all sorts of pictures, videos, send it down. Rosie and I end up in Spalding in the ripening rooms when he wanted to make a point about bananas. So I just wanted to acknowledge Matt, and we wanted to announce that there will be a press award in Rosie's name every year. There'll also be a memorial award in his name, which will be announced at this event. The Prime Minister have already accepted that this will be an annual event. People are saying, oh, what's Tiani doing? And so on and so on. Well, the sweat equity in the Labour Party was at the foot of Mike Douglas, Rosie Douglas, the entire family. I remember Rosie used to call us and tell us, the man call election, you know. And that meant I had to go and wake up a person I knew in Montreal, a printer. We would start printing all night to make sure that I could then carry all his material. I carried 2 clothes changed for church, and then Rosie covered all the churches. And then I had a few clothing items, but most of the suitcase was campaign material for almost every single candidate that he had identified. And I remember when I passed through Chicago, I was so exhausted that we were printing all night. The plane started backing off from the gantry when I woke up and they had to return and let me off. And sorry, I apologize for that. So I had to basically rush out, and I was fully exhausted. So my first yielding on this rostrum is to Matt, so he can say a few words. Then I would like to invite I don't know. Well, we have an audio from Felix. Maybe we can play that after you, Mike. Yeah. Okay. So Matt will say a few words.
Good evening. Yeah. Good evening, everybody. Good evening. Good evening, Prime Minister Gonzalez and the rest of the delegation here. I just want to have some brief words tonight because the last memory I have of Rosie is he walking down a hotel in Japan and he said, "Comrade, I'm going to Australia. Want to join me?" I said, "No, I have another meeting in Trinidad, so I wouldn't be able to join you." That was my last memory of Rosie walking down the aisle. But tonight, I just want to say there are more questions than answers. Different answers, it depends on who you ask the questions. Some people might say, well, the government is not doing enough. The government might say, yes, I'm doing enough. And that might be a conscious call. But I just want to say in his memory, and I would, of course, ask the government of the day, the Dominican Labour Party, just in his memory, that they should establish, given his closeness to the press in his time, I have been in the media for over 30 years. I've never met another prime minister that was so close to the press. You had access to him 24/7. Doesn't matter what time you call, he might be in the bathroom, he'll tell you, hold on. And then he will return your call. Anytime, Monday to Sunday. Just to say that I would ask the government of Dominica to set up a scholarship in his honor. Every 3 years, on a rotating basis. So a young media person can get a scholarship in his honor. And the second request I would have is to pass a bill, a freedom of information bill, so we can have more access to information in Dominica. I think that is very, very necessary. Okay? And I just want to end on this note. A scholarship in his honor for the media, and requesting from the government to pass a Freedom of Information Act so the media can have more access to information. Thank you.
Okay, we can hear the note from Felix Augustin.
A very pleasant good evening to everyone. I must start by paying my respect to the family of the late Prime Minister. I can't imagine that the passing of such an illustrious son of the soil gets any easier for you. I was particularly heartened to hear that efforts was being made to recognize the late Prime Minister, someone who became a friend, and as such, I jumped at the opportunity to say a few words in his memory. As we mark the 25th anniversary of the passing of the late Prime Minister Rosie Douglas, we pause not only to remember the man, but to reflect on the enduring impact of his vision, his leadership, and his love for the people of Dominica. For me, this remembrance is deeply personal. I had the privilege of working closely with Mr. Douglas as his press representative attached to the Government Information Service. In that role, I accompanied him across the globe, meeting Dominicans in faraway cities, engaging with leaders and thinkers, and witnessing firsthand his tireless passion for Dominica's place in the world. Our visits to various parts of the United States, the Virgin Islands, various Caribbean countries, the French islands, and Europe are pieces of a dream that me as a young reporter will cherish for as long as my memory remains. Mr. Douglas was more than a politician. He was a dreamer and a doer, a man whose vision for Dominica extended far beyond our shores. He believed wholeheartedly that Dominica's greatest strength lay in its people, those who lived here and those who had built lives abroad. He often said that every Dominican, whether in Roseau or New York, Portsmouth or London, had a role to play in shaping the destiny of our island. Our travel took us to many places, to community halls filled with Dominican pride, to boardrooms where he made the case for investment, and to gatherings where he inspired hope among our people overseas. And in every conversation, you could feel his conviction that by forging stronger ties with our diaspora, Dominica could open new doors of opportunity, understanding, and progress. Rosie Douglas had a rare quality. He connected with people, whether it was a farmer in the countryside, a young student, or a business leader abroad. He spoke with warmth, humility, and authenticity. He carried with him the heart of a servant leader, one who sought not power for himself, but empowerment for others. When news of his sudden passing reached us, it felt as if a light had gone out in our nation. Dominica lost not only its prime minister, but also a visionary who dared to see our island as part of something larger, a bridge between continents, cultures, and communities. His death left a void that even today remains unfulfilled. Yet, 25 years later, Rosie Douglas's dream still speaks to us. It reminds us of what is possible when leadership is guided by love for country and by faith in its people. It challenges us to continue building those bridges, to reach out to our Dominican brothers and sisters abroad, to invite them home, not only in body, but in purpose and a partnership. As we remember him today, let us do so with gratitude for his service, his courage, and his unwavering belief that Dominica's best days were still ahead. And let us honor his legacy not merely with words, but through action, by continuing the work he began, the work of unity, inclusion, and nation building. 25 years have passed, but his voice, his energy, and his dream for Dominica still echo among us. May we keep that dream alive. I thank you.
Thank you for that. I received that message and I listened to it as he sent it to me. Could you hear me? No, you can't hear me? Okay, fine. I just wanted to acknowledge, I don't know whether she's here, the Kalnago chief. Annette, no? Okay, is Lloyd Pascal? No Lloyd Pascal? Okay. I would like, in organizing and planning this thing, we made a few requests from the government and the Labour Party, and I wanted the Labour Party as part of this 20th anniversary. Two, I've asked and requested that the government consider giving Rosie a posthumous award. Rosie died on the 1st of October. At that time, the immediate independence period, Eugenia Charles was being given an award, and I think in the cabinet discussion, they suggested that Rosie should be joined with Eugenia Charles and receive that award. I think he should receive an award in his own right, even posthumously. Lastly, we requested that the government of Dominica write the Canadian government requesting that Rosie be exonerated, as the inquiry that the government of Canada made admitted that they put agent provocateurs among the black students and the students that were fighting for fairness to end up in most of the damage that ensued. So 1, they must apologize, 2, exonerate, and 3, pay reparations. We should demand that from the Canadian government, and we should ask. So the Honorable Vince Henderson, Dr. Vince Henderson, has agreed to this, and he has already received a draft from us. So we expect those communications to take place soon. The university involved, Concordia University, have already apologized for its failings, because at the time the school was a very progressive school providing education to the working class, and found themselves unable to deal with a charge of race discrimination, which stopped the Caribbean students from progression to medicine and other professions. So we should demand that, and that we have an annual event here, which I think the Prime Minister have already answered to that. So I wish to thank the Labour Party, I wish to thank the government of Dominica, and I, as the protocol has been established, respect to all of you here. I want to say one thing about the selection of the speaker this evening. The Honorable Comrade Dr. Ralph Gonzalez is one of those leaders in the Caribbean from Rosie's time that continues to take my phone calls. Even if he's in a cabinet meeting, he takes my calls. So respect. We consider you a part of our family. And thanks for being who you are and continue to be who you are. A friend, a brother, a comrade. So we say that. So I think our next person on the list is the acting Prime Minister, who will make some remarks. That's the next person. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Let me recognize the presence of the Prime Minister of St. Vincent, Dr. Ralph Gonzalez, President of the Dominican Labour Party, Ambassador Nanton, General Secretary, Minister Laville, son of Rosie Douglas, Mr. Tiani Bianzin, my cabinet colleagues who are present here this evening, Comrade Reginald Austri, Ambrose George, members of the Diplomatic Corps. I recognize the presence of the Ambassador to Dominica from Cuba and Venezuela. Let me first apologize for the absence of the Honorable Prime Minister, who is out of state at this time on state business. During the passing of the late Rosie Douglas, I was still a teenager, and I remember Ambassador Nanton and the late Rosie Douglas coming at home, and one of the things he would often request before he get there would be a soup or a broth. And that is one of the fondest memories that I have of him. Rosie was about people. It was about love. And his fight, his vision, is what brought this Dominican Labour Party into office after 20 years. "25 years later, we are standing on a foundation that he built. And I believe that every Labourite can be proud of the work that we have continued 25 years later. This work was continued by the late Pierre Charles and continued now with the Honorable Roosevelt Skerritt. It is often said that this Dominica Labour Party, this Labour Party cabinet, this new cabinet, has shifted from the vision of the late Rosie Douglas. And this is far from the truth. Ladies and gentlemen, comrades, friends, education has been a passion of the late Rosie Douglas. And this is evident in the policies of this current administration. And we saw this with the universal access to secondary school, the free tuition to the college, and the one graduate per household across Dominica. We all know that the late Rosie Douglas was passionate about housing. And at this time, I must recognize the efforts of Comrade Reggie Austrie for the work that he has done in housing. Ladies and gentlemen, it was this administration, building on the vision of the late Rosie Douglas, that offered squatters $1 a square foot. It was this administration who would offer 2% loans to public servants. It is this very administration who offered free housing to the people of Dominica. And just last week, we handed 21 homes in the Sifriere constituency. And that is building on the vision of the late Rosie Douglas. In the area of healthcare, we continue to see an increase in the number of specialists that we have on island. We continue to see improved facilities at the Dominica China Friendship Hospital, at the new Margaret Hospital, at all the new health and wellness centers that were constructed recently. This is building on the vision of the late Rosie Douglas. We have not only made healthcare accessible, but we have made it available to all Dominicans. Ladies and gentlemen, comrades, friends, Prime Minister Skerrit continues to build on the vision of the late Rosie Douglas. He continues to make himself not only available to the press, but available to the people of Dominica. And ladies and gentlemen, most of you would remember that when he became Prime Minister, the Honorable Roosevelt Skerrit that is, and he opened his doors to every Dominican, it was described as a red clinic by some. And ladies and gentlemen, he opening his doors and the doors of the office of the Prime Minister to the people of Dominica is building on the vision of the late Rosie Douglas. Ladies and gentlemen, the slogan, the motto, "All shall eat," has become something that every Dominican can identify with based on the policies of this Labour administration and the vision of the late Rosie Douglas. I want to thank each of you for coming out tonight. Thank you for your continued support. Thank you for continuing to believe not only in the vision of Rosie Douglas, but in the vision that Roosevelt Skerrit continues to build on. Ladies and gentlemen, we are here tonight to listen to Comrade Ralph, and I think he has enough to carry us through the evening. So thank you all for coming, and do have a pleasant evening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prime Minister. Brothers and sisters, back in the 70s and in the 80s, the life we lived in the Caribbean was very, very different. And we had a few young men, very young men, who dedicated their lives to the liberation of the people of the Caribbean region and the Caribbean civilization. Some of them were called Musketeers, some of them were called Mohicans, but they worked together, north and south, east and west, deported that place, blacklist that place, no visa to travel here and there, but they stuck together as soldiers, as brothers, as friends. And when the funds was not enough, they carpooled in a room and slept on the same bed. But they were all very bright, all very passionate, all with all big hats. with a vision for the people of the Caribbean civilization. And whether you went to Antigua, or you came to Dominica, or you go to St. Lucia, or you go to St. Vincent, or whether you go to Southern Africa, or anywhere where Pan-Africanism existed, they were there as titans. Brothers and sisters, I don't want to say too much tonight because the next speaker is someone who has been around for a few decades. The next speaker is someone who fought in the trenches back in the days and continued to do so many years after. And with Rosie and with Tim and with George, those fellas, they fought and they fought a good fight, but they were always full of humor. And I'm sure the comrade here will share some of them. It was difficult sometimes to see or to imagine when you walk into a room with Rosie, he dealt with the business in 10 minutes in every hour, and 50 minutes was about laughter. And so many of his friends were like that, where they get down to the business, real business, but dealt with that. And then I had the opportunity as a young boy to stay in the room with them, and they would stay up all night and talk from sundown to sun up. So I know tonight I cannot be long, because the next speaker has a lot to say and has a lot that he can say about his friend, his brother, his partner, the last of the Mohicans, brother. Welcome, Prime Minister Ralph Gonsalves.
Mr. Chairman, my dear comrade, the Honorable Deputy Prime Minister and members of Cabinet and Parliament and party activists, those who former parliamentarians, Your Excellencies, members of the family and the media, I'm very happy to be here this evening. As you know, not too long from now, there would be another heavyweight championship fight in St. Vincent and the Grenadines sometime before the end of the year. And only a few things could get me away from the battle. And as everybody knows, that I love elections, especially when you're winning them. I have a long paper written because I wanted to structure my own thoughts about Rosie. But I wouldn't read the paper. I will speak from the head and from the heart. No, he was my dear friend and comrade. I loved him very much. And that love was returned. I became a member of the Douglas family through my relations with Mike and Olive and Rosie, and of course Sister Pat, who worked in St. Vincent and the Grenadines as a member of the Clooney sisters, St. Joseph of Clooney. And of course, the younger generation. And Tiani will tell you that I have been speaking to him for quite a while, as he correctly said. Any of Rosie's children, any of the family, I can't be too busy for them. And he would tell you that with the Labour family, you may stray a little, but we always have a place for homecoming. Always have a place for homecoming. And in this labor family, if we have problems, we deal with them inside. We don't allow vanities to take us in any warring outside. Because at the end of the day, what has brought progress to the working people in the Caribbean, in Dominica, in St. Vincent and the Grenadines is solidarity. We must never forget that. The other matter which we must remember, and I will come to Rosie in some good remembrances. We have a number of persons whom we educate. The working people have made tremendous sacrifices for them. And many of them think that they are bright. And they are indeed bright. And that the education which they receive is their birthright and as a consequence of their brightness. Well, there are a lot of bright people before this generation, and they never had the opportunities. And the opportunities are created through solidarity. And insofar as brightness goes, there are two kinds of brightness. Brightness which illuminates and a brightness which blinds. If you're driving your SUV on high beam and you're coming to me and I'm driving my SUV on high beam, we're so bright we can't see one another. We only have brightness in solidarity with one another. The Right Excellent Marcus Mosiah Garvey, National Hero of Jamaica, and arguably the most significant political leader among black people in the diaspora in the 20th century. Very much influenced Rosie. He wrote and spoke repeatedly on a theme about working together, which is what Rosie was about. Marcus Garvey said, if you want to go fast, you go alone. But if you want to go far, you go together. And in going far together, you will find out that you go faster than if you go alone. In the 1930s, in the anti-colonial uprisings, the working people and the peasantry, most did not finish primary school. But yet, they were the ones who accepted what their nationalists and labor leaders told them, that we must have universal secondary education, that we must have a University of the West Indies. They didn't finish primary school. And it is that pressure through the social democratic revolution, which had its beginnings in the 1930s, that the University of the West Indies was formed, was created, was established in 1948. If it were not for the University of the West Indies, I would not have gone to university in 1966. And the University of the West Indies would not have been created but for the solidarity among the working people and the peasantry. So my life, Rosie's, our lives made and molded in solidarity. And I have found, and Rosie found, the strongest allies, the most reliable people are the poor, the working people, and the peasantry. And in order to know how the whole thing runs, we had to ask our mothers and our fathers and our grandparents. But we also have to ask our daughters and our sons. What is the purpose of asking how the whole thing runs? The purpose is to make a whole daughter and a whole son. Not a perfect daughter, not a perfect son. A whole daughter and a whole son. Out of the compromise that the fever of history has made us. And in order to do so, we have to come home to ourselves. And in coming home to ourselves, we must have the realization that though we are not better than anybody else, nobody is better than us. These are foundations of Rosie Douglas. Simple, straightforward, but profound in their meaning and their implications. And he learned about these things through life and living. From observations, from working with people, from reading, studying, and building organizations. We can talk about Rosie in 5 different phases. Growing up in Dominica from the time of his birth in 1941 until he left here in 1960-61. Then we can look at the second phase of his life, the Canada years. The third phase, from 1976 when he came back, brought back in chains, to 1992 when he became leader of the Dominica Labour Party. And there's the period, the fourth period, 1992, until the year 2000 when he became Prime Minister. And the 8 months, the fifth phase, is when he actually served as Prime Minister. But to understand Rosie, in addition to understanding the personality, we have to understand the context in every single set of circumstances in which he lived and which he was molded to know this man. There's a great writer in the middle of the 19th century called Karl Marx. In a very famous book called The 18 Brumaire of Louis Bonaparte, it is very strange to find any leader anywhere in the world quoting Marx. Everybody run away from Marx as if you're a zombie running from holy water. You don't have to accept Marx's programmatic position in his manifesto of 1848, which grew out of particular European conditions. But everybody has something to teach you if you're willing to open your minds to learn. Marx said something which was confirmed by C.L.R. James, Trinidad intellectual, perhaps the most towering intellectual in the Caribbean from the 20th century, who also big influence on Rosie Douglas. In his famous analysis of what he called the Black Jacobins, Toussaint Louverture and the Haitian Revolution, published that book in 1938. And he makes the same point that Marx made in the middle of the 19th century. Men and women make history, but only to the extent that the circumstances of history permit them so to make. They do not make history in circumstances chosen by themselves, but by circumstances inherited from the past and those which have emerged at the time of their life and living and production. And part of the circumstances are the ideas in the heads of men and women which oftentimes weigh like a nightmare on their brains. You can't judge Rosie outside of his context and outside of his times. You can't judge Skerritt outside of the context of his times. Real life, living and production take place now. But it takes place from a historical process and matters which emerged. But I begin by telling you, you have to know how the whole thing runs. And you have to ask your parents and your grandparents and your daughter and your son. And the purpose of it is to make a whole daughter and a whole son, not a perfect one. Out of the compromise that history has made all of us. Doesn't mean we have to be compromising about fundamental principles. So, there are some persons in a particular context will be accommodated by that context, and they do not wish to challenge anything in it. Not Rosie. You always wanted to see the amelioration, the betterment of humanity, peace and justice and shared prosperity. And to live the life that he has lived, Rosie must have found resonance in what the prophet Jeremiah reported to us. What did he report to us? Before you were in your mother's womb, I knew you. I made you. I blessed you. I sanctified you. I set you apart. And I proclaim you prophet to all nations. He had a sense of mission. God make some people for certain times. But the times in which you live oftentimes constrain you while you push against what you do not like. And Rosie, like Issachar, one of the leaders of the 12 tribes of Israel. You read the book of Chronicles. There's a description of each of the leaders of the 12 tribes of Israel. But about Issachar, it is simply said, he knew the times and he acted accordingly. And Rosie was a visionary who came to understand the necessity and the desirability to address practical things in the here and the now. I am of the view that if Rosie was born in Roseau, that he would not have been the politician that he has come, that we come to know him. The sturdy rural values shaped him. The community spirit, the people-centeredness of his life and living, the instinctive love which the workers on his father's plantation showed to him and he showed to them. Yet at the same time understanding that there were occasions, he must have felt it, that on the estate there would have been exploitation. He himself rebelled against part of that. I don't think that Arby would have approved of that, but you'd have understood. Because despite their differences, and of course their subsequent reconciliation, they loved each other. And Rosie learned what a strong person must be like from his father. And even as his father could not comprehend certain things that he had set upon for his own life, he loved and admired his son Rosie. Life possesses multiple interconnected contradictions. The important issue is how they are resolved. Now, I think the second matter for Rosie, apart from the issue of that community spiritedness and that connectedness with people living and working for one another. And I understand it very well too, because I'm a boy from the country. And I knew that if I were born in Kingston, the capital city, I would not have been the person I am. Not saying anything against the rural life. I mean the urban life. No. I'm talking about how you're molded for particular purposes. Rosie also loved nature. You have to if you grow up in the country. The rivers, the seas, the mountains, the flora and the fauna, plants, the animals. And you feel a connectedness that while you eat from them and have an interaction with them, with nature, you're required to protect it and preserve it for the next generation. These are lessons. Who all here from Portsmouth? Put up your hand, let me see you. All right. And as the Rasta man say, you overs what I talking about. Anybody here from Tatan? What about Pebush? Representative from Pebush is here. Yes, yes. The youngest one. Youngest one in the Labour family in Parliament. Magnificent child of God. Now, important too in growing up in the rural areas is that of family. Family is important. I want to say to you, you find out how family is important when you reach 60 going on 65. If you ain't have a family which close to you and helping you, you better get plenty money. Because if you ain't got no money and you ain't got no family, you're on your way to the poorhouse. So remember family. I'm talking verities of Rosie Douglas, you know. That's why it wasn't so easy to pigeonhole him ideologically. And I'll tell you where the wellspring comes from. I'll tell you where the wellspring comes from. I know him well because we spent a lot of time together. In those days too, when we traveled and we sleep in the same bed. In those days, two men, grown men sleeping in the same bed, there's nothing wrong in that. because in the popular discourse, to be gay was to be happy. It has a different meaning now. No. And the importance instilled, well, throughout all the communities, urban and rural, the importance of education. And that is why Labour parties, one of the reasons why Labour parties attracted such tremendous support. You know, in the early days, in every one of these countries, when the Labour leaders went to Parliament and talked about universal primary education, the planters and the commercial elite in the parliaments, you know what they said? If you educate everybody, who will walk the land? Huh? Without understanding that you just don't need strength to walk land. You need brains to walk land too, like any other activity. And the small farmers know that. Because they learn it from their experiences and from the Hebrew people. And in learning with your work attitudes, good work attitudes, you know he who watcheth the wind will not reap. He who gazeth at the rain will never sow. You try one thing in the morning, and if it ain't work, you try another thing in the evening, because you never sure which one will work. These are things which farmers learn in the rural areas, which we learn and we know about instinctively. And we also know that we have to be learning more and more things in order to improve our lives and living. Rosie also, and in the rural community, Rosie was a Christian believer. I know some of you who knew him well would not know this. Oh, he was tall and handsome and strong and charming, and women loved him much. But that never took him away from fundamental Christian beliefs. You know, I'll tell you something, and the Cuban ambassador is here, and I'll make the comparison. In December 2013, I went to see the Holy Father, Pope Francis. And we were inside the Sanctum Sanctorum talking for about 2 hours. Shooting the breeze. A Caribbean man and a Latin American one. And I said to him, I asked him, I said, Holy Father, what do you think of Fidel? Meaning Fidel Castro. As those who know the Latin Americans, you ask them a question which they have been pondering, and they have come to a conclusion. They look at you, they squint, they move their hand over the face. This is what the Holy Father did now. Put it under his chin. Look up and down. Don't answer me yet. And then pointed his finger at me. He said, I consider Fidel to be a believer. And he proceeded to give me chapter and verse as to why he thought that Fidel was a believer. Of course, about 2 months later, I went to Havana and I told Raul, his brother, and Raul, who is a humorous man, said to me, but you know, Ralph, Pope Francis is a Jesuit. And the Jesuits have been known to get it wrong sometimes. But I believe Pope Francis and not Raul in this. And Raul gave me, from his experience with a Jesuit principal of his school, why he got it, some things wrong, you know. But you look at Rosie's life, you look at his work. There was a steadfastness to certain propositions, which you find in chapter 25 of the book of Matthew. I know you all came here tonight not expecting some of this, what I'm talking about. I knew him well. and I knew his innermost thoughts. I knew him and talked to him in the dead of night when nobody is around, in solitude, and he will bare his soul to me and I to him as two comrades who love each other and who in this struggle through life and through death. And I'd say, just by the way, one of the reasons why I continue at the age of 79. I'm 20 years older than when Rosie died. More than 20 years. And I pray that I continue much of the work what Rosie and I spoke about and not leave behind any unfinished task. I know the press don't usually hear politicians talk like how I'm talking tonight. Go home tonight and study. Read chapter 25 of the book of Matthew. It has 3 dimensions which you find in Rosie's work, central to Rosie's work. The first is the parable, well, the story about the wise and the foolish virgins. They were all looking for husbands. This is a story Christ is speaking, as recorded by Matthew. He made the point that those who put oil in the lamp and keep the fire burning were the ones who got the prize, who got the husbands. Well, it may come to you simply that you put, as we sing it, we sing the Sankey, put a little oil in your lamp, keep it burning. Put a little oil in your lamp, I say. You know what that means? You have to plan. That's the first thing. That's putting the oil in the lamp about planning. First thing. The second story in the book of Matthew 25 is the parable of the talents. And the proposition which arises from the parable of the talents is from him according to his ability, to each according to his work. What you have, what ability you have. Talent referred to there was talents, the money, but it refers to talents generally. You must make use of these talents. Don't hide them under a bushel. Make use of them. And for your reward, you get in accordance with what you put out. It has to be fair and it has to be just. But what it tells you, you have to make use of your talent. That's why God don't like lazy people. These things are fundamental, you know. If you have them in you, through the changing scenes of life, through all the vicissitudes of life, they stay with you. And when you don't get the fair and just reward, that when some people like Rosie and myself come by and say it has to be just, it has to be fair. And the third proposition in the book of Matthew is a story about separating the sheep from the goats. This is the one now about caring. To keep, if your brother is hungry, you have to help to provide something. Thirsty, if your son is in prison, you go and visit. The person's sick, you have to try and help. And that is where labor parties come in. But remember, you have to plan, and you have abilities. You have to use them. You have to work, because you ain't got nothing to share for the poor unless we produce or we work in solidarity with others external to us, our friends and allies, to help us. Now tonight, we are remembering Rosie in the best possible way. You know, the ancient Greek historian Thucydides, in a very fascinating book called the Peloponnesian Wars, in which he recounted a funeral oration of Pericles. The point was that when the young Greeks came back from war, to be sure, it was a requisite that they be memorialized in marble and in stone. And we have to give Rosie his due in that. But the most important memorial is in the hearts and minds of a grateful people, which we pass on from generation to generation. Most important. Rosie went to primary school in Portsmouth and dealing with first phase. When he came to town, Roseau, he went to St. Joseph Academy, he went to grammar school, he played cricket. They give him a good basic colonial education, but he rebelled about the limitations of that colonial education. And as he growing up, he loved fishing and hunting, and he loved cricket. And he had some modest skills in it. And he always loved cricket, which is important to remember in the totality of the human being. He also, remember, we are all men and women, real flesh and blood people. And we have strengths and possibilities and weaknesses and limitations. Don't ever, ever forget that. And he had to have his fun too. And cricket, he loved his cricket. And one of the reasons why he couldn't settle down himself and marry a woman is because he loved the people too much. That was his life work. He loved the people, not in the general, but in the particular. Anybody can say they love people in the general. The critical thing is to love in the particular. Because it is that love in the particular which has joys and pain. Because if a general love disappoints you, you shrug it off. But if it's a particular love, it's painful. But you only know the joy from a particular love. And in his case, he loved people in a particular manner. And though his defeat in 1990, when they gerrymandered Pebush constituency, he nevertheless would have learned lessons from that. That all politics is local. And you have to pay attention to what is happening on the ground. And he learned also the pain of defeat. Unless you have victory and defeat, you don't know what this thing is about. It makes you stronger when you turn a setback into an advance. Don't wallow in the setback. Turn it into an advance. I'm talking about Rosie, and his life. Rosie, we know the story that is well told, and Rosie told me about it too, how he left. He wanted to go and study agriculture. His father told me he had ambitions for him to help to run Hampstead. And Rosie also, in his youthful zest and love nature, wanted to do that too. He didn't know yet fully what the calling was ahead for him. And he wanted to go to study agriculture, which he went and did. And we know the story about how he had problems getting the student visa. He got on to John Diefenbaker, the Prime Minister. Can you imagine that? Remember, in those days, we didn't have this, You had these old phones, so you had to crank up. To get from Dominica to Canada to talk to somebody is a hell of a thing. To talk to the Prime Minister. It's an extraordinary story, Absolutely extraordinary. And of course, we know he went there, he did agriculture. And because the progressive conservatives were in power, and Diefenbaker was a progressive conservative, Rosie got linked up with the young conservatives. And he got to know a lot of people. In fact, at that time when Rosie was there with the young conservatives, most Caribbean people were looking at Pierre Trudeau, who was the rising star in the Liberal Party in Canada, and who subsequently became Prime Minister. But Rosie acute as always in his understanding and observances, saw how Caribbean women who had gone up to work as domestics, how they were treated. How Native Indians, they were Aboriginal peoples, were treated. how black people generally were treated in Canada. And the conservatives, including the leader, the young conservative, Joe Clark, who subsequently became a prime minister, wouldn't address this question. And Rosie broke. In this phase in Canada, there are two persons of great influence in Rosie's life, and I want you to remember them. I want you to remember them here tonight. One is Alfonso Alfie Roberts of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The second is Leonard Tim Hector from Antigua and Barbuda. When Rosie finished his school in agriculture and he went to Montreal, Alfie Roberts was there and Tim Hector. Tim Hector was a brilliant student. Alfie Roberts, how many of you know about Alfie Roberts? Nobody? Well, here. Just as a matter of question, how many of you know about Walter Rodney? A little bit more. What about Sir Walter Raleigh? I believe many of you ashamed to put up your hand. You know Raleigh. You know Walter Raleigh more than Walter Rodney. I know Walter Raleigh more than more than Alfie Roberts. Alfie Roberts is the first man from the Windward and Leeward Islands to play Test cricket for the West Indies. Did you know that? In 1956. He went to New Zealand with the Test team. He played one Test match. He actually made the team while he was a schoolboy at Queen's Royal College in Trinidad. Everton Weeks had seen him in St. Vincent and said that this is a young man of real talent. And he was put into school in Trinidad, Queen's Royal College, one of the top schools. And at 25, he went there in New Zealand at 18. At 25, Alfie gave up the game to concentrate on matters of liberation. He was a scholar, a researcher, practically a one-man research team in Montreal, Alfie Roberts. And Rosie would have been fascinated with Alfie because of cricket. And remember, at this time, there is the civil rights movement in the United States with Martin Luther King and the more radical positions on civil rights by Malcolm X and by Stokely Carmichael. And Rosie got to know Martin Luther King and Stokely Carmichael, who was originally from Trinidad. And Alfie Roberts introduced him to writings of national liberation. And it is in that phase in Rosie's life that he became a Pan-Africanist. And he became a revolutionary Democrat, socialist oriented. He told me the first time he read The Wretched of the Earth by Frantz Fanon, he felt the scales falling off his eyes. Began to see the world more clearly. Fanon was a psychiatrist. He studied a black man from Martinique who studied in Paris and then went to Algeria to practice his profession and became a member of the liberation movement in Algeria, fighting for independence against the French. So Rosie got steeped in Pan-Africanism, anti-colonialism, anti-imperialism, and these never left him. Never left him. Whatever adjustments he had to make in Dominica to take account of the peculiar nature of Dominican society and the economy. Some probably even thought, well, he was going soft on certain things. No. Sometimes you have to stoop to conquer. A lot of people don't know that. A lot of people are not mature enough to understand that. But he always kept his eyes on the ball. You see, your highest mountain peak in Dominica is what? Eh? Mount Diabloto. Yes, they taught me that in primary school. You ever climb it in a straight line? Eh? You're going to the top, you ever climb it in a straight line? You have to take zigs and you have to take zags. The important thing when you take a zig or a zag is not to go in a cul-de-sac, in a dead end. When you make a zig and a zag, you must be going to the mountaintop. And if you can't move something, you walk around it. This is what mature life and living teach you, and which you have to incorporate in your political praxis, both your theory and practice. A lot of people don't realize that. And as I said, there are many contradictions which are interconnected, and it's how they're resolved or muted as you go forward with progress. Took a while for some to understand Rosie. But don't worry about that. That's part of the testing. No. I joined with the comrades in the Dominica Labour Party and the government, demanding of the Canadian government to exonerate Rosie Douglas. He did 18 months in jail, not for what they charged him. He and I spoke about this a long time. And in fact, there were reports which showed, and he told me about that, agents provocateurs who helped to mash up the computer center at Sir George William and also set fire. But when Rosie was in jail, he didn't waste time in jail. He taught prisoners. He acted out the third limb of the 25th chapter of Matthew. Educated them. He wrote a report about prison conditions and recommended reforms in the Canadian prison system. And of course, when he came out, he went on a tour, explaining many things and seeking to build solidarity and unity between Caribbean people and African people and poor whites, working class, and also the indigenous people. The authorities say that he was a security risk, and they sent him back in chains. No, Rosie would tell me that even the most humiliating of things, Rosie will find humor. So I say, what you mean? The fellas, when they put you on the plane, they kept you in handcuffs. They didn't take off the handcuff. They said no. The fellas who took him on the plane. So, but it's a long journey. I say, what about the bathroom? He said, well, that's the problem. He said, you want to go to the bathroom. The fella had to come to him, how these bathrooms on the plane narrow. You had two men jam up a white man and a black man, a tall, big black man, and he had to. You just have to picture the absurdity. When he came back, he met a Dominica which was in some political ferment. Dominica had already had associate statehood with Britain. In 1967, Leblanc, Edward Oliver Leblanc, the darling of the working class and supporters of the Labour Party, had led the party with distinction. And then he left. He just left in 1974. We know that Patrick John came to the fore. And then the talk was for independence. And Rosie came back and set up the Popular Independence Committee and brought a number of people, went all over Dominica and contributed greatly to that discussion. And asked, among other things, for and demanded that we have a non-executive president in Dominica and replace the Queen as the sovereign. And that happened. Nobody had anything against Elizabeth, but really, how can a queen in England be the Queen of Dominica? I mean, it's an absurdity, total absurdity. And Rosie was wrapped up with that ferment. And Patrick John did not lead well. And the Dominica Labour Party had internal differences, went to independence, and within a few months after 1978, the government, there's a vote of no confidence in the government. Oliver Seraphin became interim prime minister. Mike, who had won in 1975 in Portsmouth under the DLP ticket, was the deputy prime minister. He was another extraordinary one. But we ain't talking about Mike tonight, talking about Rosie. Another time I could talk about Mike. And between 1976 and 1992, Rosie was seeking to define a path on the left and to see if he can have Dominica change its orientation in politics and in the economy. And remember, then banana was king, supported by preferences. And in Rosie's lifetime, he would have seen that in 1993, the banana preferences start to diminish to the point when he arrived in office, they were almost completely extinguished. And of course, the glory days of bananas are gone because of the falling off of the preferences as Britain joined the single market in Europe. And Rosie building links all the time. One, as we know, in 1985 in Pebush, and then he lost in 1990 when they gerrymandered the constituency. 1980, we began to see the regime of Eugenia. At a time, Eugenia Charles, at the time when Reagan and Thatcher were dominant in the world. And there was a right-wing revolution, and imperialism getting more and more confident. But yet contradictions in the international capitalist system and in the periphery like in Dominica. He lost in 1990 when the gerrymandering took place. And then very sadly, Mike died in 1992. And we know the story. Rosie became prime minister, and he became leader of the Labour Party, succeeded Mike in Portsmouth, and remained the MP for Portsmouth until he died in 2000. Rosie, until he died there. And when Rosie became leader of the DLP in 1992, as you know better than I do, Rosie was the principal critic of the Eugenia Charles government. In the period after 1983, well, if you go back a little earlier, in 1979, is a high water point for the progressive movement in the region. Maurice Bishop becomes head of the People's Revolutionary Government in Grenada. The revolution took place, but 4 years later, internal differences. The government fell, and the revolution collapsed, and Reagan invaded with Eugenia's assistance and buried the remains of the revolution. And that period of conservative reaction emerged, and that Rosie had to operate in that context. I had to operate in that context. And Rosie, George Odlum, Tim Hector, and I, particularly in the post-1983 period, until he died, we worked very closely with one another. Rosie was close in this period to the Libyan government, well, Muammar Gaddafi. Rosie had been going through Africa quite a lot. And Rosie made a very important contribution in persuading Gaddafi to switch the Libyan support from the Pan-African Congress, which is a narrow political organization in South Africa, which in their constitution, only black people could have been members of the Pan-African Congress. And the African National Congress, led by Nelson Mandela, who was in jail, had a broader base and talked about involving all ethnicities in a democratic movement to build a free South Africa grounded in social democracy and socialist orientation. And Gaddafi began to support the African National Congress and assisted the African National Congress of Nelson Mandela in training persons in Libya and for providing economic support. Another Caribbean leader provided enormous support, decisive support, was Fidel Castro, in sending troops to Angola to help to defend the independence of Angola, and took on the South African army at the Battle of Cuito Valley and defeated them. And it is this popular movement across the world, in which Rosie was part of, in supporting Mandela and the ANC, which eventually led to the dismantling of apartheid in South Africa. Now, in that period, Rosie was closely associated with the Mataba. The Mataba is the political wing of the Libyan Jamahiriya under Gaddafi which dealt with the political dimensions of external affairs. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs dealt with the formal diplomatic stuff. So Rosie had, with the Mataba, had connections with liberation movements all over Africa and progressive forces elsewhere who were provided with support by the Libyan authorities. And he was critical in that particular period. You know, during that period, as Rosie got very popular, they were saying that he doesn't have responsibility. He's just flying all about, he's doing things, he getting money from Libya, he's a communist. You remember all the stories? Yeah, married, you got no responsibility. I remember one night I was telling my dear sister from Pebush the story today. But I was up in Pebush with Rosie on the platform, and Rosie's addressing the question very humorously about his unmarried status. He said, you don't understand how freedom is on his case, that he ain't married, he ain't got no responsibility. He said, but Eugenia older than me and she ain't married either. And they make she prime minister. And then he proceeded to say, he said, I want to get married to a Dominican. And you know, sometimes Rosie's talking like this, you don't know whether he's playful, whether he's serious. He said, I want to get married to a Dominican woman. He said, but none of them want me. He said, I specifically want one from Pebush. And he said, I have asked, and they have agreed, Mary and Elizabeth, 2 women in Pebush, to choose a woman for me in Pebush and said, this is the woman you have to marry. And of course, the audience was just laughing. So when Rodi sat down back, he's sitting down next to me on the platform. I said, comrade, you serious about this thing? You put the question of holy matrimony in the hand of 2 women in Pebush? He said, don't bother about Ralph, man. He said, everybody here know Mary and Elizabeth have never agreed on anything in their life. And then the lesson, remember I started about solidarity and we mustn't have divisions. The lesson of the period 1979 to 1992, that period with the collapse of the Patrick John government until Rosie became leader in 1992. There were all kind of different factions of the Labour Party coming and going. You look around, in St. Lucia, the divisions in the St. Lucia Labour Party caused the St. Lucia Labour Party to stay out of office for quite a long time. You look in St. Kitts, the divisions in the party between Denzil Douglas and Timothy Harris. The working people do not like divisions. They expect that we will have arguments and we could have quarrels and we could have differences. But you have to settle it inside of the Labour family. There's a lesson then, and there's a lesson now. When you leave the Labour family, it's a terrible thing. You're a traitor, you're a renegade, or you're a castaway. You must not leave the family. You stay in the family because it's solidarity that keeps making progress. That is the lesson. Oh, you get all kind of vanities. And nowadays, the vanities are multiplied because of this. But this remains fundamental. One of the reasons for the success of the Unity Labour Party in St. Vincent and Grenadines, in nearly 25 years since I'm Prime Minister, I've never fired a member of cabinet, and none has ever resigned on me. If anybody playing the fool, I call you by me. If you're a man, I talk to you in language that if the Pope hear me, he will excommunicate me. If it's a woman, I say, sister, I say, what happening? Tell me, talk to me. Talk to the comrade. You have to stay together. No. Interestingly, to see the practicality of Rosie in the next phase, 1992 to 2000. Rosie was when Rosie began to look for, after Eugenia resigned in 1990, and Brian Alleyne took over. And we know that Eugenia said publicly she didn't like Brian. You know, she said that publicly. She had a preference for Carbon and somebody else. No. Rosie saw the opportunity to have good and decent people from freedom come to labor. And particularly he looked to see the young freedomites from where he can get persons who have a progressive outlook, who are nationalists, to get them to come to labor, because once you come into the bosom of labor, the social democracy of labor and the solidarity of labor will help to transform them and change them for the better. Now in 2000, you remember, well, in between, with all the confusion in labor, space was left for some other people to come, UWP. Remember that? Politics abhors a vacuum. If you have confusion, somebody else is going to come and take up some space, Eh? Remember I telling you this? You can watch the history of it. And then in 2000, after you had a UWP government for 5 years, 1995, under Edison, who was my good friend, and we did some work together in scope and with bananas and the like, so too with Mike and Rosie. And then the election in 2000, Labour got 10, UWP got 9, and Sovereign, Charles Sovereign, who was then the leader of the party, the Freedom Party, they got 2 seats. And what is interesting, which is another lesson, the party led by a man who is supposed to be the most radical political figure who had gone mainstream in the period after, just before and after independence, Rosie Douglas, who was traduced as a communist by freedom, the worst things were spoken about him. But then it's that party and the remains of freedom, which was the most right-wing party historically in the period after independence, they came together to form a government. And this genius of Rosie Douglas has laid the foundation for the continued success from 2000 to right now for the Dominica Labour Party. The other thing I want to say to you, and there are people who I know in the midst of battle and those who move against my real close brethren and comrade, who is like a son to me, because my oldest son, who is 53, who is my Minister of Finance, is older than Roosevelt Skerrit. So Skerrit could be my son. So he's my comrade, but I'm like a father. And we have a wonderful relationship. The genius of Rosie was to have brought them together, brought all the various elements and laid the foundation. And Roosevelt Skerrit's skills have taken it to higher heights. Now, in his period in government, his 8 months, Rosie took a whole set of initiatives. Of course, he went back to Canada triumphant because in May of 2000, because he said that he had predicted that he will go back as Prime Minister, and he went back as Prime Minister. A man who left in chains went back as Prime Minister. He who couldn't go in a bathroom without a security man with him, they give him the red carpet in 2000. After one time is the next. Solidarity. And Rosie was setting out to transform a colonial or amended colonial economy into a modern, competitive, many-sided post-colonial economy which was at once national, regional, and global. And looking for spaces even so much to want to deepen the relationships with Martinique and Guadeloupe and with France and with the European Union, which some people at the time didn't quite understand. But we live to see that Martinique and Guadeloupe and St. Martin are associate members of the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States. These are things, they happen before your very eyes, you know. I want to point something to you before your very eyes. You see, in 1980, amidst all the tumult and division of labor, the people of Dominica with great good sense say, listen, you see that confusion? Eugenia Charles and the DF, the Democratic Freedom, the Dominica Freedom Party, looks like the only one which can hold things for a while. And they went there for political stability and to see progress. And then confusion was happening after the resignation of Eugenia. And we see the problems in the UWP, and we see how Rosie brought them together. But watch this. And while Rosie and Pierre Charles played an important role between October 2000 and when he also died prematurely from a heart attack in 2004. Watch this. Dominica lost Eugenia through a resignation. Lost Mike in his early 50s. Brian Aline went to the court. Edison James loses government. Cabon died at sea. Rosie died. Pierre Charles died. Bananas collapsing. It is completely rational for the people of Dominica to have gone for a young man, Roosevelt Skerrit, to continue Rosie's legacy. It's not a mystery, you know, you just have to watch it. I'm sure the journalists would have seen all what I'm talking about. And we need to write more about it. We need to write more about it. I'll tell you something. And I'm sure that my brother Austria wouldn't mind me saying this. He says, okay, I can. I told him something about 4 or 5 years ago at lunch in Caracas, and I was there with a couple of comrades. I said, comrade, I have to tell you, I put my mouth in business and you lost the opportunity to be Prime Minister in Dominica, leader of the Labour Party. Austria was popular in the Dominica Labour Party, you know. And Roosevelt loved Austria. That's why he had him doing important jobs in his cabinet for all the time, and Austria did very, very well. But when, after Pierre Charles died, I called Roosevelt. I said, Roosevelt, Rosie had told me that you are the person who will succeed him, because Rosie expected he was going to do a good 10, maybe 15 years. The Lord give it and the Lord take it away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. I called Roosevelt. I said, how is this thing going? He said, well, you know, Austria is my friend. He's the mature person and so on. I said, Roosevelt, Dominica has gone through too much tumult. They have this problem with bananas. We need a different kind of leadership to head it. I say, as good as my comrade Austria is, you have to make sure that your name is in the mix. And of course, Brother Austria himself recognized that. Labor in Dominica, labor in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, labor elsewhere, we are peculiar organizations. We have a collective wisdom which we draw upon. And we know the history very well, and we feel it. It's a noise in our blood, it's an echo in our bones. And we know when to make right decisions. And sometimes labor can be deceptive. Sometimes some fellas making a lot of noise in the opposition. Plenty noise. Pretending to have more support than they have, and labor people just going along and so on. They're waiting and they're waiting until the trump is sung. Just as Paul predicted in another context, the dead in Christ shall rise, and the others who are living will get wrapped up. It's the rapture. The labor family has this ability. It is extraordinary. It's extraordinary. And when you knock on your neighbor door, all they say is labor. It is something which is incredible. It's existential to us, so long as we stay in solidarity and don't get divided. I want to hammer that, because that is the lesson from Rosie, as how he brought people together in 2000. And even notice what happened. My brother Charles Saverin became president and had a distinguished career as president of Dominica. Left and right? Well, it depends where you have the center. Whether you're left or you're right, it depends on where the center is. That's how that definition takes place. Of course, Rosie used to spend a lot of time with me in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and Eloise, my wife, who is a Dominican by descent. Her parents are from Dominican, from the Harris family. And she would have been here, but to the fact she wasn't feeling the best. But she sends her greetings, and I have to convey the greetings. And Rosie came, and Mike, and Sister Pat. Sister Pat was principal of the school in the St. Joseph's Convents, a co-educational school in St. Vincent, in a rural community, Mariaqua. And as you know, they have a rule generally that they don't give their premises for any political activity. But when the leadership elections were coming in our party for who to succeed Vincent Beach, she said, you have to have the convention in my school. Of course, the bishop didn't like it, and she told the bishop, Ralph is a Roman Catholic. This is my school. You could advise me, but I'm running the school. He's going to be elected the party leader. I want it to take place here. He's going to be the first Roman Catholic prime minister. What do you say about that? Then, just like with the labor, don't mess with the Romans, you know. There's a depth too. I know evangelicals, different ways to God, and I am an ecumenical person. But something happened. Sister Pat had a book she said she wanted to give me in the week before she died in an accident in Barbados. She contacted me, we spoke about each other, we had set up meetings, she busy, I busy, we missed the meetings. The title of the book is The Return of the Prodigal Son, by a priest who was living in Canada, man of great reputation as a theologian, Henri Nouwen, HenriNouwen. You can read that book. I advise you, published in 1996 or thereabouts. And Pat was determined, Sister Pat was determined to give me this book. But on the Friday when she was leaving for Barbados, she took the book with her, she drove past where the airport is, came to on the perimeter of the western end of the city, came to the residence of the Prime Minister, and left the book. I wasn't there. She left it there. Just with the instruction, Ralph must read this book. And when I was reading the book, the Friday night, late, I got the news that Pat had died. She was in this accident. And from then until now, this thing always on my mind. Why did Sister Pat was so insistent that I get this book? She was some force not yet known to her knew that if I didn't get it then, I wouldn't get it again. What is this book about? This book is about, and I started at the beginning, and you would understand, I didn't explain the totality of our conversation. The morning when you went to the delegates convention of the DLP. The book speaks about the homecoming. of the prodigal son. The homecoming to an all-powerful and all-forgiving God. He turns the story inside out. When we read the story about the prodigal son, and we see how he's in a distant land, and we all are in distant lands. And we're looking for love in this distant land. And we are finding it. Sometimes we have to eat what the hog eating. What happened to the prodigal son? But the important figure in that story is not the prodigal son, but the father, who is all powerful and all forgiving. In the homecoming, and the only place you can find love is when you come home. And this love is a never fixed mark that looks on tempests and is never shaken. It is a love which is expressed daily, despite dissonances from time to time, by our people for one another. Something which holds us together as a progressive society. Think about it. You think Dominica could have made the progress without this sense of solidarity with one another, an elemental love which springs from our deepest longings, informed by faith and embracing hope? We lost so many leaders in Dominica. Bananas collapsed. Hurricane David, Hurricane Allen, Hurricane Maria, the global economic crisis. We are battered. COVID, occasional droughts, all the vagaries of climate change, the harshness of the external world. And through it all, we have survived and we have thrived. We have much to be thankful for. Much to be thankful for. And a leader like Roosevelt Skerritt was helped to take us through that period in Dominica. Do not underestimate any of that. Do not get carried away by vanities. To be sure, we all have complaints. We have grouses. And sometimes I know some in the Labour family, they get a feeling in their head that they like Samson. They want to bring the temple down on everybody's head. But if they remember the story with Samson properly, Samson brought the temple down on everybody's head, including his own. And when you bring it, when you divide yourself and you create confusion and you bring the temple down on everybody's head, including your own, the morning after, you say, oh God, what I do? Weeping and gnashing of teeth. No. We can't do that. Dominica, look at the 2025. Human Development Index report by the United Nations Development Program. There are 4 categories: very high human development, medium, and low. Dominica, which has been battered in the way in which I described it in many dimensions, is in the high category of human development. A person who is sent to university, give them a free education. There is a pothole in the last half a kilometer before their house. They drive in a SUV. They get the education free. But they're on Facebook. They can't vote Labour because of the pothole. They forget that the first thing that Labour did is to fill the pothole in your head. Which made it possible for you to go to the bank to get a mortgage for your house and for you to buy your SUV. Remember your satisfactions. Do not allow your dissatisfactions to overwhelm you. You allow your dissatisfactions to overwhelm you, you will live a miserable life. You will never, ever be satisfied. Because morning by morning, new mercies we see. All that we need, thy hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness. Thank you very much.
I think I said that the last Mohican had a lot to say about his brother, right? I will now call on the General Secretary to give the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Comrade Nanton. Great is thy faithfulness. We have so much to be thankful for. Comrades, friends, God is good. And all the time, praise you, Jesus. Honorable Fidel Grant, my dear brother and friend, Acting Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of Dominica. Comrade, the Right Honorable Dr. Ralph Gonzalez, Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. What a masterful lecture. Past and present members of Cabinet and Parliament, His Excellency Ambassador Nanton, and all the executive members of the Dominica Labour Party, son of Rosie Douglas, Tiani. Greetings, comrade, and to all the wonderful family members, the Douglases, Rosie's family here with us tonight. Pleasant evening to all of you. Ambassadors of Cuba and Venezuela who are here with us, always showing support and solidarity. Honorable Justice Williams, Pastor Samuel Augustine, supporters, dear friends, laborites, the media, Porto, stalwarts, comrades, friends. Comrades, as we gather tonight, I feel a distinguished honor and privilege to give this vote of thanks at this most fitting memorial where we commemorate the 25th anniversary of the passing of our dear brother, beloved father, unifier, comrade, leader, and Prime Minister of Dominica. Rosie Douglas taught us many things, but one thing that resonates deeply was his humility. And it taught us that true greatness lies not in power, but in service to others. His legacy is not only etched in the history of this great country, Dominica, but it lies in the core, the pits of our hearts as people. It is with divine purpose that we are gathered here tonight, and as such, we say thanks. I would like to extend heartfelt gratitude to Pastor Samuel Augustine for invoking our spirits with prayer, reminding us of the divine guidance that is truly the underpinning of Rosie's visionary leadership. To Ambassador Nanton, comrade, your insightful remarks aptly captures the essence of Rosie's heart. And I certainly did not expect a normal or ordinary welcome because Rosie was dear to you, comrade. We all know that. And this continues to manifest by your work, by your service to the wonderful people of this great nation, Dominica. To Tiani, son of Rosie Douglas, your sharing today beautifully honored your father's memory. A father, a leader, and hope of a nation. Comrade, just as South Africa has its Mandela, or as they called him, Madiba, right here in Dominica, we have our very own Rosie Douglas. And brother, as I reflect on your father's time in prison, may we all be reminded that the shadows of this injustice shall never erase the beautiful brilliance of his truth. A special thanks to Honorable Fidel Grant, the Acting Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of Dominica, for your words of encouragement and the Labour Party's commitment to the ideals that Rosie Douglas championed. It is a blessing to see that this current leadership continues to build upon that very solid foundation. To Honorable Roosevelt Skerritt, our dear Prime Minister, and Honorable Dr. Vince Henderson, both of them are online right now listening. They are locked in and logged in. It truly shows that distance cannot keep them apart. It can't separate them from the collective commitment that they have for us as a people, as a nation. We are truly privileged. My friends, as we reflect on this masterful, this beautiful reflection and lecture from Dr. Ralph Gonsalves, Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, many things resonated. We saw in him the pastor, the ecumenical man, the theologian, the historian, the comedian, the politician, of course, the true friend of Rosie Douglas and of Dominica. Friends, let us all give a round of applause to this comrade in the way that Rosie would do it. Thank you, comrade, for elaborating on all the 5 phases of Rosie's life. Your reflections on our late Prime Minister helps keep his vision and spirit alive. in a new phase that I will call phase 6, the phase where we transform sweat into equity and his sacrifice into opportunities for the people of this great nation. To Rosie Douglas's wonderful family, thank you for your legacy of love and tremendous sacrifice. Your sharing of Rosie with us is a testament of your love. We thank you. Tiani, we will certainly continue to honor his great memory and legacy. This is the party that we are. To all supporters, die hard, Porto Laborites. To his dear constituents of Portsmouth who are here in large numbers tonight, past and present members of Cabinet, comrades, Austri and Ambrose, ambassadors, the media, and all who have turned out tonight, thank you sincerely. Your commitment to the ideals that Rosie Douglas stood for reminds us that we are part of an ongoing journey towards people-centered development, empowerment, humility, and solidarity within our labor family, our Caribbean family, and the global community by extension. As we close this evening, let us carry forward the legacy of hope and unity that Rosie Douglas instilled in all of us. May we continue to strengthen our bonds within the Caribbean, Africa, and the wider global community as we build a brighter future for generations to come, just as Comrade Rosie imagined it for us. My friends, in the words of Proverbs 11:25, a generous person will prosper. Whoever refreshes others will be refreshed. Rosie embodied that principle wholeheartedly. Thank you everyone for being here tonight to honor the great memory of our leader, and most importantly, an extraordinary human being. Together, let us keep his spirit alive in our actions and our commitments to our nation. Thank you. I pray for all of you traveling mercies this day and every day. May you go forward to your homes and journey safely. Long live your great legacy, Comrade Rosie. God bless you. And in typical style, where the Lord feeds his sheep, so too would Rosie ensure that his people are fed. Dinner will be served tonight. Thank you. God bless you, everyone.